welcome back into Cherry Picking today's video, Fantasy Hockey Mailbag for the week. As always, the video presented by FanDuel Canada, North America's #1 sportsbook. The link is in the description to download the app today. Fantasy Hockey Mailbag. We have like 5 or 6 questions to kind of go through here. A lot of the questions coming from one of the most recent videos I did on the channel. Are we pressing the panic button on some of these fantasy hockey players? I answered that question for about 4 or 5 players, so check that out. That's on the channel as well. Let's get into this week's Fantasy Hockey Mailbag. All right, so the first question we got here, pretty simple. What do I do with Jeremy Swayman? Well, at this point, you have no choice really but to keep him. Some people might be trying to buy low on him, but even if I'm an owner, there's going to be a point where Jeremy Swayman turns into the Jeremy Swayman we've seen for the past 2 seasons. It's just a slow start, and I think one of the biggest reasons for that slow start is the fact that he did not have a preseason, that he was not at training camp. And you could say, all I read throughout training camps, or after when he actually came back, or he was practicing with BU, that's actually going to make any sort of a difference. As we've seen, it clearly has not, because he's been terrible. The good news for Swayman through this start of the season and how bad the Bruins have been, the Bruins are top 10 in expected goals against and high danger chances allowed. So they're playing well defensively, at least. They've just had relatively shitty goaltending from Swayman, and then, as expected, from Korpisalo as well. The bad news from Swayman, as I mentioned, he's been bad. He has -7 goals saved above expected, which is 68th out of 70 goalies so far this season in the NHL who have made at least 2 starts. So that's really bad. The only 2 goalies that have worse than him are Georgiev and Connor Ingram. Last year, Swayman had 23 goals saved above expected, which was 5th at that stat category. So there's just no way he's going to be worse than what we've seen so far. Now, there's a lot of turmoil going on with the Bruins right now, like Jim Montgomery. There's some fans I've seen on Twitter calling for him to be fired. I don't know if we're going to jump to that conclusion just yet, but I'm going to say that Jeremy Swayman will bounce back. And there's going to be a stretch at some point this season where he goes on an 8-win, 10-game stretch, or 8-2, 8 straight wins, 5 wins. We've seen him do it before. He just needs to get a little bit warmed up, considering he didn't have the preseason before to do that. So you can't really trade him right now. If you're an owner of him, don't feel bad of keeping him, because the numbers at this point, you suffered through this part of it. At least get the good part of Jeremy Swayman, which will be, I would say, at some point, the clock will completely flip. And as I was recording this, Jim Montgomery did indeed get fired. So maybe that was the reason Jeremy Swayman was playing so shitty. Maybe it's because of his contract. Maybe it's because of Jim Montgomery. We will find out at this point now with the new coach, who is yet to be determined, I think, at this point. But pretty funny that it happened right after I said that maybe there's obviously some bad things going on in that front office and behind the scenes in the locker room, and then Jim Montgomery gone. All right, the next question, another kind of what do I do? What do I do with Brock Boeser? Obviously, Brock Boeser has been injured, has missed about 5 games now after suffering a hit from Tanner Jeannot against the Kings, where they won 4-2. Pretty reckless, pretty bad hit. Jeannot got suspended 3 games for the hit on Boeser, but as I mentioned, he's been out for 5 games. The Canucks have gone 2-3 over that stretch without Boeser. Now, the Canucks today announced that JT Miller is stepping away from the team for personal reasons. They have a couple other injuries as well. So it's Demko, obviously. So it's been a tough year for the Canucks, and it continues to be difficult. Darren Dreger said on the Boeser topic, he's working out, he's skating, but he's not with the team. And he said, and I quote, he's still a ways away if he's not skating with the team. As of this moment right now. So if I had to guess, I would think he'll probably be back at the halfway point of December, but I don't really think it'll be that much sooner from what I've read. And that's just purely speculating at this point. Maybe he joins the team next week, but I think it'll be midway through December. We're going to see Brock Boeser back on the Vancouver Canucks, and I don't expect it to be that much sooner. So what do you do with him at this point? You just have to keep him on your IR spot at this point. Hopefully your league, if it's not, it's a dictatorship league if you don't have IR spots. So I would put him on the IR spot because you can't drop him. 12 games played. He's been one of the better producers, most efficient producers for the Canucks. 6 goals and 5 assists. Hopefully when he comes back, maybe the Canucks can turn it around and do the same thing for your fantasy team, but definitely do not drop him. Just keep him. All right, so the next question we got here, it's kind of a 2-parter in 2 trades. I got offered Stamkos and Verhaeghe for Boldy. Should I take it? I'm assuming you own Matt Boldy and you'd be getting Stamkos and Verhaeghe, but then he also adds in, or Ovi and Larkin for Boldy and Strome, which is better. Definitely don't do the Boldy and Strome. I know Strome's super hot right now, but I think maybe he won't be able to keep up this exact pace, but pretty sure he still is either first or top 3 in the league in assists and primary assists. I know Ovechkin got hurt. That is definitely going to hurt Strome's value. And now that I'm thinking about this too, Ovechkin just got hurt, so this trade is just completely off the board. So we're just going to talk about the first trade. But I wouldn't do that. If Ovechkin was healthy, I would keep Boldy and Strome instead of trying to get Larkin and Ovi for those two players. The Stamkos and Verhaeghe for Boldy one is interesting. You know, I'm always against the give away one player, get two back, because like you're just getting two more average players, and then you have to drop someone, and then it's like kind of like roster mismanagement in a way. But this is an interesting case because Verhaeghe and Stamkos have Stamkos has definitely started off slow. Verhaeghe has started off slow, but certainly not as bad as Steven Stamkos. And I've talked about this on Money Puck, the stat that they keep on, shooting talent above average. And let's look at these three players here. Carter Verhaeghe, 14% is what they rated his shooting talent above average. His goals scored above expected this year is negative 4.2. Stamkos is negative 3.1. And I would say Stamkos has a better shot than Carter Verhaeghe. And that stat kind of alludes to it as well. His shooting talent above or percentage above average is 26%. His shot has been rated throughout the past 6 or 7 years as one of the best in the league. So that's really not that surprising. And then Matt Boldy, obviously a little bit younger than these guys. His shooting talent's a little bit lower, but his goals scored above expected at this point is 1.8, and he has 10 goals on the season. So if you're giving away Boldy at this point, I wouldn't say you're trading him at his peak value, but you're trading him where, at this point from what the numbers are saying, and if you think about how the Minnesota Wild are kind of constructed, and with Matt Zuccarello out, maybe you think, more opportunity for Matt Boldy, playing with Eriksson Ek, but Kaprizov is always going to be the forefront, the main scorer on that team. And Boldy, for the start of the season, has been acting as the top scorer. I know Kaprizov has like 1 million assists and he leads the league in points, but Boldy has been the top scorer on a team with 10 goals through so many games. You trade that away for two guys that you could say are going to just bounce back and probably score, I would say, at a consistent rate for the rest of the season, because you can kind of logically give them reasons for why they've been poor to start. New team for Stamkos. First time in his career, he's been with Tampa Bay forever, like since earlier, obviously, than 2010. Probably a little bit out of place. It's probably like trying to figure out how to play with these completely new team that he really hasn't done for so many years, other than maybe international play, but those are on only a few games. Completely new line mates, teammates, maybe one similar face. So give him a little time to maybe catch his feet and kind of score some goals. And he's starting to do that now, for sure. He's starting to score a little bit. Had 2 goals in that game against Vancouver. And then Carter Verhaeghe as well. Logical reason, maybe in a little bit of a slump to start the year. There's a lot of goals to go around on Florida. That's kind of one thing you risk it for. But when this team is firing from all cylinders, it is pretty spread out. And Barkov was out for a bit. They went over to Finland and are probably a little bit shorter on games compared to some of the other teams in the league so far. So I think getting those 2 players for Matt Boldy at this point is great. Matt Boldy also has a ton of injury concerns, has never pretty much played a full season. So I would do that trade. I would trade Matt Boldy for Steven Stamkos and Verhaeghe if it's not a keeper league as well, because, actually for a keeper league, it still even wouldn't matter that much. I think I'd probably still do this because it would have so much return value on this season and probably the next one as well. All right, would you trade Nico Hischier, I'm assuming, says Nico, and Owen Tippett for Dobson and Wilson? Noah Dobson, Tom Wilson. He has his points laid out there, the stat categories they track: goals, assists, power play points, penalty minutes, shots, hits, blocks. This is a pretty, honestly, easy answer for me. I've talked about how Noah Dobson, you should be hitting the panic button on him. Last year had a really good year. Last year he was like top 7 in fantasy hockey points. I think getting him for what you're giving away, like Owen Tippett, I think his time of being the top goal scorer on Philly isn't done. But like Travis Konechny is there, and then as soon as Travis Konechny is gone, it's going to be Michkov's team, and then they have other young guys that are going to continue to grow on this Flyers team. I feel like Tippett is kind of getting lost in this transition period almost for the team. He's been relatively average to start the year. Nico Hischier has been on fire, and I think this is the time you want to trade him. At one point, tied for the top lead in goals. I believe he does have 10 plus goals at this point too. Tom Wilson has been fantastic. Ovechkin just got hurt. Maybe this gives Tom Wilson a little bit more fortitude and opportunity on the power play. I doubt Spencer Carberry is going to switch up the line of Tom Wilson, Dubois, and McMichael because it's been absolutely firing. So Strome and Protas will have to find another line mate to kind of put up there. But Tom Wilson also gets hits. He blocks a shit ton of shots. And he's actually been shooting the puck a lot. Like on that line, McMichael and Wilson are going to be the guys shooting. Dubois is going to be the guy facilitating and not really scoring a ton. I would say the scoring is going to go to Wilson and McMichael in different ways. But I do prefer Noah Dobson and Tom Wilson here. If you're getting those two players, if it's vice versa, I would not do the trade. You should absolutely not be hitting the panic button on Miro Heiskanen, as this guy is asking right here. He's comparing him to guys like Noah Hanifin, Jake Wallman, and Phil Broberg. Broberg's hurt. Jake Wallman was a healthy scratch one of the games for San Jose, and Noah Hanifin's definitely had a pretty good start to the year for Vegas. But Miro Heiskanen, every year is talked about before the season as a dark horse Vezina candidate. This year, I don't think as much because Dallas had obviously a really successful playoffs, and he was one of the biggest reasons for that. But fantasy hockey-wise, like, the guy's going to continue to shoot a lot. Again, Dallas is one of those teams that played a few fewer games than a lot of these other teams. Like, I think they've played 16 or 17 at this current point that I'm recording the video. Some teams have played 20 to 21 games at this point. So, you know, his production is obviously going to be lower than those teams because he's played fewer games. The scoring will come. Dallas has been very inconsistent in terms of scoring the puck. They'll go through times where they're scoring 7 goals. Like, they scored back-to-back 7 goals earlier in the last week. And then they go and score 2 goals against Minnesota and then lose to Anaheim where they score 2 goals. So the scoring's been inconsistent. They'll find their footing here. And, you know, they went over to Finland. They had a weird start to their schedule as well. Now as they get into the heart of their schedule, I think we'll see Miro Heiskanen start to produce at a much higher rate. Well, I think we'll see the Dallas offense kind of start clicking a little bit better here. Maybe DeBoer, you know, goes back to some of the line combinations that have worked really well in the past. You know, getting Wyatt Johnson back on that line with Robertson and Hintz. The Seguin, Duchesne, Marshman line has been unreal so far this year too. Stankoven's starting to produce too, and that is just going to start to trickle down to the defensemen too. Miro Heiskanen has showed flashes since being back from Finland that he can still score at a solid rate for a defenseman too. So do not panic at Heiskanen, and it's disrespectful you're even putting those guys' names in terms of Broberg and Wallman in the same sentence as Miro Heiskanen. All right, thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know what you thought of the Fantasy Hockey Mailbag for this week. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Shout out to FanDuel Canada for sponsoring the video, and I'll see you guys next time.